Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Gesha Village Lot 102 Natural Processed Ethiopia from Substance Cafe. And there's the bag right there. And Substance, based out of Paris, France. And this is their third ever appearance on this channel, having recently reviewed the Chile, a wash-processed Ethiopian coffee. And usually when I hear people discussing this coffee roaster, I usually hear one thing, and that's that the coffees that they do best are the Gesha Village coffees. So I knew we'd have to pick up at least one Gesha Village coffee if we're going to be reviewing this coffee roaster, coupled with the fact that this is the one non-wash processed coffee that we are reviewing from Substance. So I'm definitely looking forward to discussing this one, as this right here is day 57. And recipe we went with for this coffee was once again the same recipe that we've gone with for all of Substance's coffees up to this point, which is a 17:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 99 degrees Celsius, about 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And I also like this one best through the V60, which once again typically indicates a more medium fine grind. However, we went a little bit more fine on that grind as well. Our roast profile for this coffee also, once again, is in line with our experiences with this coffee roaster, which we continue to describe as being one of the lightest roasted coffees that we've reviewed on this channel altogether. And this one is certainly no exception, as this coffee is extremely light by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 30, first impression, and we did opt for the V60, and the first sip definitely yielded a very interesting result, as the aroma of the coffee itself presented in a slightly fermenty sense. However, the cup itself had excellent cleanliness, almost reminiscent of a wash processed coffee, but plenty of the intensity of a natural processed coffee, as there's a slight spiced tone that had slight shades of what I would describe as El Placer coffees, but in the same way with the Chile, where we had that unusual anise first experience. That was the same case with this one, as this one also had an unusual first experience when we did open the bag, and it was a bit of an anomaly. From that point going forward, we did not experience anything similar as well. But in addition to that, it was primarily strawberry and raspberry candy focused, so I definitely did take away a lot of positives, mostly because of the ultra light cleanliness that was present within this one. Day 33 through the Chemex, and it was another nice day of this coffee, offering exceptional clarity for a natural processed coffee, with the red berry candy at the forefront yet again, and a bit better defined of a floral aspect, this time in line with the listed rose. A slight spiced quality is once again present, but this time it's felt in a much more tea-like sense, as the profile of the coffee continues to turn out very well, as this was once again another nice day. And usually I have a lot of concerns when it comes to natural processed coffees that do have those red notes on there, mostly because it's very difficult to get those red notes to present in a cleaner sense, and that's why I was very happy that these first couple of impressions of this coffee were presented in a cleaner sense. So I was very happy with the way all of that had turned out. We move on to day 36, as we opted for the April brewer, and once again it was another very nice day for this coffee, as it continues to have a heightened level of clarity and a well-defined berry fruit aspect that is also complemented by a red florality, once again in line with the listed rose, as I really appreciated the definition of the notes that were present within this one, especially given that they were on par with the notes that the coffee roaster had listed in themselves. But also some perfumey florals were also present this time around. Clean and intense yet again, mostly consistent so far, and I've been very happy with the nice level of consistency that was presented within this one. Day 39 through the V60 with our higher extraction adjustments, and the coffee continues to hold up very well, as it has sharpened a lot of the sweeter fruit and floral qualities, with the brewing aroma offering a very lovely aroma to it that translated exceptionally well into the cup itself. A well-defined red berry aspect and exceptional clarity yet again. A slight tea aspect is present within the finish, but it's been pretty nice, and I don't necessarily want to say that this coffee has been overly defined by the red fruit aspects. I would say that it's mostly been the cleanliness of those red fruit aspects, but outside of that, it's been pretty direct in that sense, as those things seem to dominate the majority of the coffee, while at the same time not being presented in a heavy sense whatsoever. Day 42 through the Chemex with Substance's recipe, and once again it continues to hold up pretty well, this time with some lower extraction adjustments, as it's still offering a nice bit of intensity. So this is the first coffee that we had experienced from them where it seemed to work regardless of which direction we went with, and regardless of which brew method we opted for. In addition to that, a notable bit less of the fermentiness and heaviness to it, as it's relatively toned down from some of the earlier days, but even then it's still a very nice experience to this one. We move on to day 45 as we opted for the V60 with Substance's recipe. And once again, it's still a pretty nice day, this time with the focus mostly skewing on the red side of the fruit and floral aspects yet again. Sweeter red berries at the forefront. There's a bit more of the listed tea-like qualities presented in a pretty well-defined sense. Cup is also interestingly the brightest that has been to this point, so I didn't necessarily know what to make of that, but in general, the coffees that we've had from Substance have tended to turn out a little bit more bright. Day 48, through the V60 with our standard recipe, and it feels like the coffee might be slightly better with the higher extraction adjustments, as it's still nice through this brew method, offering an almost raspberry jello-like sweetness with a pretty rose gummy sweetness as well. Slight spiced tea component is also present with a slight bit of the pineapple and darker stone fruits like a plum as well. So this time around, mostly focusing on this last day, I picked out a little bit more from this coffee, though at the end of the day, I feel like I really appreciated the way that this coffee was presented when we pushed it a little bit more. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have a handful of level 4s, so let's go ahead and start with the cleanliness at level 4. And while that's probably the most important thing to discuss within this tasting wheel, I'm going to jump right into it, mostly because it was the defining factor of this coffee. I really didn't expect it to turn out as clean as it did, mostly because it was just so red fruit forward in the description that I was curious to see just how well they would do with it, and I'm really impressed with the way that it did turn out, mostly because it's really difficult to kind of execute that very nice level of definition and clarity to a coffee that does have those red qualities to them. So massive credit to Substance on that. I really appreciated that aspect of this coffee. Finish, level 4, and it's kind of interesting that given that this coffee is so red fruit forward at the forefront, it does seem to kind of finish in a much more tea-like sense to it, as I feel like that's probably the Gesha and Ethiopian qualities at play within this coffee. Even then, it is kind of interesting to see just how this coffee transitions from the moment that you first take that sip to the end and kind of finish of this one. We move on to sweetness level 4. First level 4 sweetness we've had from any of Substance's coffees, and it's not surprising given that this one is a natural, but I'm always very happy when natural processed coffees don't score a combo level 5 in the finish and sweetness, mostly because that usually tends to insinuate that they are a little heavy and overbearing for me, but this one right here, very nice on the sweetness, slightly higher side of the level 4, so very happy with that, especially given that the cleanliness is at that level 4 mark. Florality, level 4, and it's something that I've kind of discussed on the secondary state of that listed rose component to it. It is present, it is prominent, but I think that the focus of this coffee being a little bit more on those red fruits seems to take away from that experience, so I would definitely say that it was quite well presented within this coffee, as it also had a little bit of a spiced quality that I associated a little bit more with the tea-like components within this one. We move on, berry fruit, level 4. And I probably could have justified a level 5 for the berry fruit, but I think I just wanted to demonstrate that this coffee is nice and even as opposed to overbearing in any sense. So even though there's a very nice, what I described as being raspberry gel-like aspect to it, I think it's a little bit better suited for that level 4 mark. We move on to the level 3s. We'll start with probably the most interesting one, acidity, level 3. Given that all of the coffees that we've had from Substance up to this point have scored that level 4 for brightness, it is just kind of interesting to me that it did score that level 3 mark, though I'll be completely honest, this tasting wheel was made with the standard recipe that's 96 degrees Celsius, 205 degrees Fahrenheit, so I feel like that might have impacted the overall brightness. Even then, I think I just kind of wanted to demonstrate that it wasn't maybe quite as bright as some of the other coffees that we did have from Substance. We move on, citrus fruit, level 4, correction, level 3. I briefly mentioned that there's a slight bit of a pineapple-like aspect to it, and that's also where the bitterness at that level 2 does come into play, as it did offer a little bit more depth than just a super red fruit, red floral forward aspect within this one. We move on, stone fruit level 4, once again level 3, and it's another thing that I briefly mentioned, and that's those darker stone fruit aspects that are present within this one. It gave me definitely a lot of plum vibes, and given that this coffee did have a little bit more of that darker fruit, darker floral theme, I don't think it's too surprising that that's another thing that I did take away from this coffee. And then two more things worth discussing. We'll start with the savoriness, level 3. And I've been mentioning that a lot, that there's a tea-like quality to this one. And I once again recall them having a tea-like note list on there. Obviously, they don't have notes listed on their bags, so I can't remember exactly what the tea-like note that they did have listed was. But I could definitely feel a fair bit of that was present within this one. Right from the onset, I said that there's a spiced quality. And then for the entirety, it was also a lingering quality within this one. So I can definitely see and justify that being there at that level 3 mark. Final thing worth discussing, body, level 2. a natural processed Ethiopian coffee, an Ethiopian coffee nonetheless, and a Gesha coffee. You had definitely expected to have a lighter body to it, but even then I would say that it held up pretty nice. It didn't have that very, we'll say, delicate level 1 body, so it had a little bit more of texture to it, but even then, obviously lighter bodied. So as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it is a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, it was definitely positive, and I feel like at the end of the day, I could make an argument for either this one or the final coffee that we're going to be reviewing from Substance as my favorite coffee. Most of the higher end offerings that we did have from them did live up to the expectations, and I would definitely say that this one is every bit on par as a lot of the other natural processed Gesha Village coffees that we've had in the past. I would say, yeah, it's probably even on the better side of the majority of the ones that we have had. I wouldn't necessarily say that there was anything that I could really take away from the overall experience of this coffee, except for the fact that it did skew a little bit more away from the general profile that I do like. Not the biggest fan of those red fruits in general, but when a red fruit is presented in this nice of a manner, that exceptional clarity and that really nice definition, then it can turn me into a believer of a coffee like this. So I really appreciated it for what it was, and I think that there were so many positives to take away from this experience. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. I feel like if you do like your red fruit qualities, but you are also concerned about the fermentiness and heaviness that can come from them, this one presents it in such a wonderful sense, as it's very easy to brew. It went along so well in all of the brew methods, all of the recipes, and all of the adjustments that we did make, which goes to show that this is a pretty consistent and versatile coffee in general. So that makes it a enjoyable experience in that sense, coupled with the fact that it does have some very nice sweetness, a very high level of sweetness, especially in terms of that fruit sense. A lot of positives once again to take away from this one, but also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Gesha Village Lot 102, natural processed Ethiopia from Substance Cafe. Thank you for watching.